Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. Arizona has a lot of notable industries. We're known as the Copper State because mining has been around for years. And of course, tourism is the state's bread and butter.
But there's one category that's frequently overlooked, and that's the wine industry. In fact, Arizona has more than 120 wineries and tasting rooms across the state, generating more than $150 million a year.
Today, we're talking with Kris Pothier. She is the past president of the Arizona Wine Growers Association and current owner of a winery. She tells us where the Arizona wine industry is blossoming and what consumers need to know when it comes to choosing the perfect bottle.
This is On Your Side with Susan Campbell and Gary Harper, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
All right. I'm Gary Harper. Welcome to the On Your Side podcast.
And I'm Susan Campbell. That was a new intro. I liked it.
That was my rendition of Matthew McConaughey.
Just giving it a whirl.
All right.
You have to work on that a little bit.
I don't do impressions, but that's the
There's a reason, I can tell.
That's the closest one I can get to.
Needs more work,
Really?
Gary.
All right. Really?
No, it's not good. It's not good.
Oh, gosh, you're hurting my feelings over here.
Sorry.
How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Not bad. Listen, if you had to eat one certain food all your life, let's just say Chinese, Mexican, or Italian, and you had to do it every day, which one would you do?
Those are my three choices?
Those are your three choices. Chinese, Italian, Mexican.
Oh gosh, that's like the hardest question I've ever heard in my life.
You love
I
them
love
both?
them. I love them all.
All, yeah.
I feel like I have to say Italian because I have
Yes.
an Italian side of my family that would be very disappointed in me if I didn't say Italian.
Yes.
And we make homemade pasta in my family.
Oh,
So,
seriously?
yeah.
Are
So-
you going to invite me over?
Yeah, it's really good.
Homemade pasta?
Homemade ravioli is our specialty.
Who makes that?
I do.
You do?
My mom does. Yeah. It's a great grandma's recipe.
Who's Italian? Your mom or dad?
My mom was.
Your mom.
Yeah,
Oh.
I know.
She's got to be like the best cook.
She is an incredible chef. Yes.
So I'm gonna have to choose Italian myself.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I love it. I mean, it's Mexican is a close second.
Yeah. Well, Mexican is easy to pull off. You can, make all kinds of different dishes.
That's true, and not quite as difficult as say making Italian.
Yeah.
So, but listen, I love Italian, and you know what else I love with Italian?
What?
A little vino.
There you go. I knew where we were going with that.
A little wine. What do you like?
All kinds of wine.
I like the deep, dark red.
Okay.
The darker, the better.
All right.
That's how the Italians do it.
I like pretty much anything except I'm not a Chardonnay fan.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Not my thing.
But if you're doing Mexican, you could always have sangria, though, too, right?
There you go. So many options.
Listen, we're talking about wine today, and I like this topic, and we're going to be talking to Kris Pothier. She's the past president of the Arizona Wine Growers Association, and she actually owns her own winery. Thanks so much for joining us on the On Your Side podcast. How long have you been in the wine business?
Oh, my goodness. So about 2004.
Really?
2004, yeah.
Okay. And how did you jump into that? What were you doing before, and then what happened? How did you transition to that?
You know what? It's a pretty interesting story. So my husband and I moved to Sedona, Arizona from Eugene, Oregon. We met working at a restaurant in Oregon, and the owner was the sister of Evel Knievel. And she was very wild and allowed us to drink copious amounts of Oregon Pinot all night long.
I like her already.
Yeah, so Joe, my then boyfriend, was hired to write at the Red Rock News. So, straight out of college, first journalism degree. We moved to Sedona. We had a couple weeks to get here, and we were simply winos. We met in a restaurant. We drank a lot of wine. He covered wine for the local U of O newspaper. And so he's at a county meeting about 2 weeks into his job at the Red Rock News and sees Eric Glomsky of Page Spring Cellars getting a license to open a winery. So he comes running home and says, Kris, there's wine here. There's like a burgeoning new emerging culture. And the rest is kind of history. We got pulled in real fast.
Wow. Yeah, you made that plunge, and it sounds like you're doing well. Arizona, we're known for a lot of things, tourism being the top of the list. but a lot of people don't realize wine here in Arizona is kind of like a blossoming industry. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so wine in Arizona in the modern times started in the really early 80s. It was a really cool soil scientist, Gordon Dutt, got a grant to study the Four Corners and find out where grapes grew the best. And when they studied the 4 different states, they found Sonoyta and Elgin in Arizona propagated the best vines. And so they started a little culture. And from there, we've just kind of grown it. It's been relatively organic, and it's taken a lot of, relatively crazy people to get involved and really push on it. And Arizona is pretty unique because we can grow a lot of different grape types, which poises us as different than a lot of different places in the United States. We have a soil type, an elevation, and a climate that allows us to grow grapes from Iberia, Spain, Italy, France, Corsica. All of the different regions grow well in Arizona. So we're a renegade, exciting culture.
I guess the top thing is cool nights and hot days, which is what we kind of have here in Arizona. That kind of helps with the grapes, right?
Absolutely. That diurnal shift is really key. And we also have some really nice monsoonal activity. So right when you think it's just incredibly too hot for grapes, we get that great release in the sky and some moisture that pulls out the growing season a little longer than it usually would be if it was just a straight hot state. So we have really neat growing climates. And I think that the only thing that we actually run up against is late frost. We're actually in that period of time right now where buds start to burst, and sometimes we'll get hammered with a frost mid-April, early May, and that will kind of mess with our grapes. But other than that, we have a really cool climate.
Who's buying Arizona wines? Is it Arizonans or is it people outside of the state?
Personally, we have a wine club that has 700 members, and we ship about 150 wine clubs. So the rest is in the States. So a huge population of the people who are purchasing, drinking, enjoying Arizona wine are actually Arizona natives. And we have barely even touched the population that lives here. So we have lots of room to grow there, which is great.
When you are having those conversations with people and you're saying, oh my goodness, the wine here is really great. We have so many different ways to do this wine here. Do you find that people are surprised that Arizona is another wine region?
Yes, back in the day when I first started, that was constant. It would be frustrating to be someone who sells Arizona wine. So many times people would come in and the first thing they say is like, I'm a Napa wine lover. And you were like, oh, I have a while to catch back up to get them to understand the terroir, the way the grapes show themselves here. But, times and the American palate have greatly changed, and wine love in our states has gone up, up, up. And it's so much easier to sell wine, and it's not as confusing to people that Arizona grows grapes.
Tell me about that. You said the palate has changed. How has that happened?
I think some of it is just every state grows grapes, and there's little beautiful cultures within any state that you go to. And it's a really nice thing to do is to support your local ag, and to taste where you're at. So because people have opened their eyes to the idea that it's a way to intake a place, I think they've started to become more savvy and less honed in on a single varietal, like that Chardonnay thing. It used to be Chardonnay, Cabernet, Merlot. These are the only grapes. And in Arizona, we're constantly proving these strange varietals that no one's heard about. And less people are balking and confused by it and saying these definite statements like, I only drink Merlot. Or another way to look at it is I was pouring wine for Tumbleweed a few years ago in Cave Creek. And we were in the backside of this restaurant, and a seasoned, lovely, old cowboy walked up and didn't bat an eye and asked for rosé. And in the past, that would have been impossible.
Yeah, I can imagine that is a picture way back when you wouldn't have seen.
Yeah, you mentioned Tumbleweed, and that's your winery. So tell us a little bit about that. And if I understood correctly, I don't think you actually grow your grapes. Don't you bring them in?
Yeah, so we have fruit contracts with a few different growers in the state. So all Arizona. One of our main contracts is with Todd and Kelly Bostock. They own a really awesome label called Dos Cabezas, and we source a lot of fruit from their Cimarron vineyard, which was actually put in the ground by Dick Erath of Oregon Pinot fame, a very lovely person who actually recently passed. He came to Arizona after he sold his very famous and well-known Oregon brands and put in vines in Wilcox. And now Todd and Kelly own that vineyard, and we source a good amount of fruit from there. We also source fruit from a place called Sierra Bonita, and this is the old Hooker's Ranch. It was one of the first cattle ranches in Arizona. It served cattle for the Spanish-American War. It has so much history. The owner is John Smith, and he and his father started this vineyard years ago. It's such a beautiful chunk of Arizona. And the man who actually wrote the Miranda rights propagated a bunch of beautiful cactuses down there. So there's just like this really neat Arizona history cobbled into the Arizona wine industry that I love.
You mentioned Wilcox. So Southern Arizona, is that kind of like the bread and butter of grapes?
Yeah, there's three growing regions in Arizona. Sonoyta Elgin, which is a little further south than Wilcox, was the first AVA, which is a federally designated grape growing region, and that was in the 80s. Wilcox, which actually grows 78% of the fruit in Arizona, was a designated AVA in somewhere like 2013, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. And then the Verde Valley, where I actually make my wine, is the third AVA in Arizona, and that was just designated last year. So three regions that are very distinct. The thing that they share is a similar elevation. So the shift from day to night is great because the elevations are above 4,000 feet.
Mm.
Back in the heart of the pandemic, I had actually had a chance to come up to the Verde Valley and see some of the wine growing operations up there, and we talked a lot with some of the folks there about the challenges with supply chain. And it was really challenging to get the glass for the bottles. It was challenging to get the corks. Where do things stand now with that?
They're good. We're back in full control. I would say that the thing that we're noticing is a raising of cost. So, Arizona wine, in the scheme of things, like wine economists just wrote a great article about Arizona wine, and they called us a big little state. So we have really cool wines and beautiful people making them. But in the scheme of things, we actually produce the same amount that Justin Vineyards in the state, our state, produces the same amount as one winery in California. So we're relatively small in the scheme of things. That being said, the growers, it costs a lot to farm. It costs a lot to bring in the glass. It costs a lot because nothing is here on site. So people complain a little bit about our bottle costs, but our grape tonnage is about 3,000 a ton, and that's the same as Napa. So, you have to start quantifying the fact that Arizona is a really special and small boutique wine region. But those challenges, they've changed quite a bit, which is great because that was a confusing period of time. You didn't know. You would order glass way in advance and it would sit on the docks. And so you just kind of had to let things be what they were.
What state do you think is kind of worried about Arizona's wine industry? Like, wow, Arizona's really giving us some competition. What state you think would say that? What wine state?
So I think that most of the states that are actually the same size as us or doing the same kind of business as us don't see us as a competitor. It'd be more like we would hold hands and lift each other. But I think that California, the big daddy, they do have the bucks to fight against places like Arizona becoming something that impinges on their floor plan for purchasing bottles, selling bottles, taking away some of their shelf space. So if we ever try to change the laws in Arizona, the wholesalers from California are the first to slap at us. So I would say from my own experience, those are the people that you feel are slightly competitive with you, even though it shouldn't be so.
What are some of the laws that you think might be beneficial to change to support the Arizona wine industry?
Well, I mean, the first one I come up with is we have a production cap limit. So if we make more than 8,000 cases of wine at Chateau Tumbleweed, we have to actually take any bit that we make over that amount, sell it to a wholesaler, purchase it back in order to sell it. So those are relatively hard business laws. That cap was put in place so that we could get open shipping between states. So it was a function of need. It wasn't particularly a bad idea at the time in 2006 because we couldn't have interstate shipping. But now we've grown enough that we're touching that production cap. And a couple years ago, right around 2020, we tried to change the laws. And, you know, unfortunately, COVID just shut down all of the legislature that year. So nothing happened. But it did show us that the wholesalers are serious and not wanting us to change our laws.
That is crazy. So you are capped at 8,000 cases, and then if you want to make 15,000, you have to sell the surplus to a wholesaler and then buy it back, you said?
Yeah, it's a pretty strange little loophole, you know, to keep the small businesses small, I suppose. But really, in the scheme of wine, even up to like 40,000 cases is tiny, you know? So we're talking about minuscule amounts of wine that we're capped at. And these are just old 3-tier system laws, not to get into trouble even talking about it, but you know, it can be just a little bit anti-business when you start to really think about it, especially when you own a business.
Yeah, 8,000. I mean, that doesn't sound right. You better get a lobbyist on your side.
We,
you know?
we do, you know, the AWGA, we have lobbyists, and, you know, we're working on all of our grassroots relationships, and we have a lot of lawmakers that are super into Arizona wine, and they've done a lot for Arizona wine. They've pushed a lot of funds through the Office of Tourism, and we have a lot of state support. So it's just more like when you actually go about law change, it's tough, and you need some dollars and some energy.
I think there are a lot of people who really enjoy drinking wine, but have no idea why they enjoy drinking wine, right? They don't know anything about the actual grape or the taste or what goes into it. Where do those beginners start? What do you recommend we all kind of do to get the very most out of choosing a wine?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand that you have all of the power. So many times people perpetuate this sort of behavior pattern in wine that if you don't know something, then you're not on the inside, and that's so not true. It's grape. It's like a natural thing that happens in nature. There's a communication that happens, and then we steward it through to a bottle, and that's really all it is. And it's a beautiful thing because it unleashes bits of your nostalgic personality that can start to associate it with different flavors and smells and tastes that you've had in your past. It also is good for your heart. It's good for letting go and relaxing. And I think that if people started to approach it that way and say, okay, this wine isn't for me, this wine is for me. And how I learned wine is I started to write down, oh, I liked this wine. What was that grape type? And then I would go to the store and buy a few bottles of that grape type and just slowly cobble your way into a base understanding of what it is that you are excited about. And then after that, you know, find the people that are stewards of advocacy for the love of wine versus the like profound, you know,
stuffiness.
Stuffiness, yeah. I feel like a lot of that has fallen off. We're in a good time in wine.
You said it's good for your heart. I have a feeling you have probably the healthiest heart around. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because one of the misconceptions that people have when they have a romantic version of what winemaking is, and so they think that we're constantly drinking wine. And to be honest with you, like, there's a lot of physical, it's a lot of movement, it's a lot of movement of volumes, it's a lot of heavy lifting, and it's not easy the whole way through, so you actually can't do it very well if you're wine soaked.
Yeah.
So I've become more and more sober the deeper into the industry I get, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
Hopefully you still get to kick back and relax at the end of the workday.
I love when I'm in a restaurant, somebody orders a bottle of wine and they come, they uncork it, and you're supposed to, they pour it and you're supposed to smell it and taste it. I've never seen anybody turn it away and send it back. Have you?
I have. My father-in-law.
Oh, what?
He's a particular wine drinker.
He sent it back.
He did.
What did he say?
He just didn't like it.
Really?
He didn't want to waste his time on a bottle of wine he didn't like.
Did he go with another one?
Yeah.
And did he like that one?
Yes.
Oh, man, poor waiter.
Well, but we got to enjoy it, right?
I hope he tipped well.
Absolutely.
There's a couple. So, like with natural corks, there's a TCA. It's a cork taint. It's a bacteria that lives in the cork trees, and it's kind of similar to when you smell old books. It's a compound, and it lives in some corks. So you can actually get a corked bottle of wine, and it smells a particular way. And the science is high now, so they kick out corks that have that TCA component in them. But every once in a while you get a corked bottle of wine. And over the years you can start to understand what that is. And that's why I would send a bottle back. Like when you buy baby carrots, they all are kind of corked. You know that smell that you get on baby carrots? That's cork taint. So it's a component, and the thing that it does is it kind of makes the wine monotone. So it takes away the fruitiness and the coolness. And it's just a natural thing that happens occasionally. Like if you have one corked wine in a lot, you're not going to have the whole lot corked. You'll just have that one bad bottle.
Let's talk accolades and awards. What kind of awards has Arizona won in the wine industry?
Gosh, Arizona's been on the map for a lot of years. Kent Callahan, who took over my position as the AWGA president, he's been making wine in Arizona since I was, graduating from high school. He's just such a great winemaker. And many years back, his wines were served in the White House, I think in the Bush administration. But, as the years have passed, Todd and Kelly have been one of the top 10 brands to watch. Michael Pierce, my partner down the road, he's Bodega Pierce. He's also the enology instructor at the Southwest Wine Center. He was Business Monthly's top 10 guys to watch. One of Chateau Tumbleweed's Picpoul Blanc white wines was in the Wall Street Journal as the 10 wines to buy for Thanksgiving from smaller regions. I've seen people get double golds and best in class in the San Francisco Chronicle competition over and over and over. So we stand really well in competitive fields. Yeah. Arizona wines do great.
I really wish we were doing a wine tasting while we were having this podcast. We didn't plan well.
I was going to say, why didn't we do that? I mean, now, can we just end this podcast and start all over again?
Yeah.
We'll bring in some wine, some good wine.
That sounds wonderful.
Some tumbleweed wine maybe, right, Kris?
Yeah, please. I would love that. I've been, I have a few staff members that are on vacation. So I've been in the tasting room for a few days, and I've had some really cool California people that are on vacation right now that have spent their whole lives in California wine country. And it's so fun to turn them to Arizona wine and have them buy cases and join our wine club and understand that Arizona is a serious state for wine.
Hey, real quick, do you guys do tours?
We do, yeah. So our facility, we sit in Clarkdale, which is the little town between Jerome and Cottonwood, close to Sedona. We have a wine, we make our wine here, so a winery. We just added a barrel room, and then we have a really beautiful tasting room and nice patio. It sits and overlooks Sycamore Canyon. It's just a great place. We do little tours, but they're not as exciting as Page Spring Cellars. They sit on their vineyard, and that's a really nice place to go for tours. Or you can go into Old Town Cottonwood, where there's just standalone tasting rooms along with antique shops and different places to eat. So there's a lot going on in the Verde Valley. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And then if you really want to do something different, you can go down south, and there's really neat places to stay. And these places are much more rural. And as long as you plan properly, your mind will be blown. You just need to make sure to bring food and set yourself up.
Sounds like a great day trip, whether you head up to Clarkdale or down south. I mean, what a great trip and experience. That sounds really neat.
Absolutely.
All right, Kris, thanks so much for joining us on the On Your Side podcast. If people want to find out more about you or Tumbleweed, Do you have any websites or social media platforms you want to throw out?
Yeah, so we're actually called Chateau Tumbleweed, and it's www.chateautumbleweed.com. I'm Kris Pothier, and you can find us, just Google us. I do all of the strange drawings for our labels. You'll find tumbleweed-headed humans.
Yeah, I've seen it.
They are beautiful. I love them.
All right, listen, appreciate you joining us, and I think it's time that we all partake in a little vino after the podcast.
Done. Sign me up.
Sounds good. All right, Kris, take it easy, and thanks for being on the On Your Side podcast.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you too.
You too. The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton, and I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.